Last weekend, I was in Lansing, Michigan for the UCC annual convention. And the keynote speaker there is a pastor from Colorado, and her name is Nadia Bolz-Weber. She wrote a book that was on the New York Times bestseller list last year called Pastrix. And she's a really striking woman. She's tall with spiky black hair, and she has tattoos all over her body. And she was an amazing speaker and a wonderful teacher. And she said many provocative things. And one of the things she told us was, she said, I get to visit many churches, and what I notice is that there are churches who have the American flag up on the altar. And she said, if you're one of those churches, I would advise you to please remove it, because the American flag is not a sacred Christian symbol. It's not, and it doesn't belong on an altar of sacred symbols. Pretty surprising. And what she explained was that this only happened after World War II, that there were a lot of Protestant churches in this country that were formed by German immigrants. And they wanted to really demonstrate that they were American. So they brought the American flag up to the altar. Now, our postlude for today, I noticed, is Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. And it's a beautiful song of praise to God. And yet we've taken that and turned it into a patriotic song that is sometimes referred to as the battle hymn of the Republic. As if a battle could ever be of God, a hymn to God about a battle. Somehow we have equated church and state together. And this is a fairly recent thing. We think that this goes back to the founding of this country, and it doesn't. For example, the Pledge of Allegiance, where it says, one nation under God, that was added to the pledge in 1954. That's pretty recent. Most people in this room were alive in 1954. So it wasn't that long ago. And then 3 years later, in 1957, that's when our paper currency said, in God we trust. It's only since 1957 that that was added. This was during the McCarthy era, where there was a lot of fear about who was a communist and who was an American. And we began to equate sacredness with patriotism. This is not at all what our founding fathers were about. They were very clear about the separation of church and state. Our second president of the United States, John Adams, said, the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And so oftentimes we hear that we're a Christian nation, but that's not what we were founded on. We were founded on the freedom of religion, which means you were free to be any religion you wanted or not be any religion at all. That's what this country was founded on. And so I think the founding fathers would be very sad that there are some courthouses that have the 10 Commandments on the wall. And if you believe that public school children should be saying the pledge, one nation under God, then you have to be okay with a kid saying one nation under Allah, because we have freedom of religion. Now the founding fathers, many of them, like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, were not Christians. They were deists. And deists believed that there was a God, and there is a God, but they didn't believe that that God needed to be worshipped. So there was no worship that they went to. They didn't believe in dogma. They didn't believe in holy books that were divinely inspired by God. And they did not believe in the divinity of Jesus, that Jesus was God. However, they believed that Jesus was a way shower. Thomas Jefferson, for example, although he was a deist, he took a Bible and he cut out just the words of Jesus and he pasted them in a blank journal. And he said, "This is all I need from the Bible. The rest of it can be thrown away. All I need are the words of Jesus." That's all that's important. So let's today focus on the words of Jesus in today's gospel. That very iconic statement. It's actually in 3 gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke's gospel, where he says, "Give to Caesar," or "render to Caesar" in some of the translations. Render means to give back to. So give back to the state what's the state's, but give to God what is God's. The Pharisees are trying to trap Jesus to see where his allegiance is. And either way, he really can't win. And it's oftentimes why today some people say, well, if you don't love this country because you're always saying what's wrong with it, then get out. America, love it or leave it. As if speaking out against injustice means that I don't love my country. But that's in a sense what they were trying to do with Jesus, to see where his allegiance was. And he gave a brilliant answer. An answer so brilliant that it says they were amazed and they just walked away. And so let's look at what he really was saying here. You give to the state what's the state's. So I pay taxes to the state, and in return I get things of the state. I get paved roads and highways and public schools and lots of services. But then he says, give to God what is God's. So what I get of God is what I give. I had a spiritual teacher once who told me, you should give to where you are spiritually fed. And I really like that. So if you're spiritually fed, if you find God in the arts, then by all means give to the arts. And if you find God in nature, if that's where you're connected, then give to a nature conservancy. If this community here, Douglas UCC, makes you feel when you leave here on Sunday uplifted and supported and more connected to God, then by all means, give of your time, talents, and treasures to Douglas UCC. And that's why this gospel fits so perfectly with our stewardship theme. But as you know, we follow the Christian lectionary, so that just happens to fall in to our theme today so perfectly. When we give of our time, talents, and treasures, it is mostly in service. And I guarantee you that when you give of your time, your talents, and treasure to the sick, to the homeless, to the poor, you know that when you give that, you receive the things of God. And that's what Jesus is saying. You give to God what is God's. And I think that's why St. Francis of Assisi said, it is in giving that we receive. So I give my taxes to the state and I receive things. But when I give these things, this service, I receive the things of God. Now Jesus in this gospel reading is really talking about value. We heard that in the words of integration this morning. And I love how value has 2 definitions. So value could be where we talk about, well, what is the value of my home or the value of my car? It's about money. But then we also hear value used in values, in morals and beliefs. Those are my values. And Jesus is really saying here to put a value on what's really valuable. The things of God, not the things of the state. We know that investing in the stock market, that it's going to fluctuate. It's going to go up and down. Same thing with the housing market. The things that we buy, that we invest our money in, they eventually are going to decrease in value, or they're going to go out of fashion. And Jesus is saying that when you give the things of God, the service of love and compassion and forgiveness and peace, this is something that's never going to decrease. It's only going to increase. This is what we were talking about last Sunday, that rich, abundant harvest that you've been invited to. This great feast and bounty is yours. When you give that, you receive that. When you put your investment in things that are going to fluctuate, oftentimes you experience fear, doubt, and worry. But when you put your investment into the things of God, you will experience the rewards. What you receive are the things of God: love, peace, and joy. Now, I want to get back to patriotism, because I don't want anybody to think that what Nadia Bolz-Weber was saying, or what I'm saying, is that love of country is a bad thing, because it isn't. It's wonderful. What I think we have to be careful of is that sometimes patriotism can lead to separation and superiority that says, our country is the best, or to feel separate from one another because they're from a different country than us. I've been seeing this recently with Ebola, and I'm thinking how Ebola's been around for a long time, and this year alone, thousands of people in Africa have died from it. And yet it took one person to have it here for everybody here to freak out. And it's because we say, well, oh, now it's come to me. But what Jesus was demonstrating is we're all one. We're all the same. You created countries and boundaries and borders. We want to dissolve those. What happens there affects me. We're all one. Which is why the founding fathers of this country had a very beautiful motto for this country. It was replaced by "In God We Trust," but the original motto was not religious. It was secular. And that motto was "E pluribus unum." It's Latin, and it means out of many, one. Isn't that a beautiful motto for our country, for our world? Out of many, we're one. This is what it seems like I've been talking about almost every Sunday here, because it's the motto of the UCC, that they may all be one. What we are trying to do as good stewards is to invest our time, talents, and treasures in things that build oneness in the world, that get rid of those boundaries and borders that we create between ourselves and those who we consider the other, those who have other ways of worshiping, those who have other ways of living, those who live in other countries. Jesus came to say there is no other. You're all one. That's what the spiritual life is all about, getting to that realization and then working to make a world that really shines in oneness. So let's pay our taxes and let's give to the state what is the state, but more importantly, let us put our time, talents, and treasures on the things that help build oneness in the world, the things that are of God. These are the things of value. Namaste.